Welcome to Whiskey Gaming, and this is my late review of Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion. I played it on the PS5, it's also available on everything else. Okay, so let's start with the story. You play as Zack, you start out as a soldier class 2, and you basically climb the ranks to class 1. Anybody who's played Final Fantasy VII kinda knows the story already, but you get to experience how Zack fits into the Final Fantasy VII world and lore in this game. And he has really his own adventure in it beyond that, because he's learning from his mentor Angeal. You have Genesis, who goes off the rails. You get to see Sephiroth before Sephiroth was a villain. And I'm gonna be honest, it's been a long time since I played the original game on the PSP, and there were parts of this that I totally forgot, and I'm glad to replay it and glad to re-experience that story. I don't really want to go too in-depth to it, but I do want to say that I did enjoy the story. I think it fits in well. It's hard to say how this fits in with like the Final Fantasy VII Remake, since that starts to really change canon, but I don't have any complaints with this game. I enjoyed that story. Now let's get into the audio, and the first thing I'm going to say is they recast everyone. So if you played the PSP version, all the voices, or at least it sounded like all the voices, were different. And the first thing I'm going to say is I don't like the new voice actor for Zack. I really just don't think he did as good of a job. His voice doesn't fit the character as well as the original voice actor, but there are also some early lines where delivery could have been far better. And I'm going to say, even though he's not in it much, I still don't like the new voice for Reno. Everyone else, however, I think did well. I should say, though, you do get used to the new voice actor for Zack, mostly because you hear it so much, but that doesn't mean that I think it's as good as the original. As for the soundtrack, I think it's amazing. I mean, Final Fantasy in general has great soundtracks, but I've always loved the Crisis Core one. And as for the sound effects, I think they work well. Whether it's the magic, the monsters, just the combat in general, moving around, I think they do a good job. Now let's get into the gameplay mechanics and whatnot, and this is an action RPG, but because it was originally made for the PSP and that gameplay really does carry over, it was made to be consumed in bite-sized chunks, so it's not a super long story and the chapters are fairly short, but it does lead to one of my favorite features in that you can pause literally everything. I wish every single game did that. So you have your main missions, and like I said, they're not super long, and they come in bite-sized chunks, and that works well for the game. But then you also have a ton of side missions that you can do, and they're basically, you know, go defeat these enemies, unlock this stuff. They are very simple, but it worked well on the PSP, and it still works well now. You can jump in and burn through a bunch of them, and then just bugger off without really it mattering. Without it negatively impacting you, without you losing track of where you are in things. It all works nicely for bite-sized chunks. As for the combat, it is very much action-based. It's kind of what you started to see in later games. It's what you started to see in things like Lightning Returns, kind of Kingdom Hearts-ish, and Final Fantasy VII Remake. You're in a combat arena, you run around, you fight, you select what you want to do, but it's very free, it's very reminiscent. You can honestly really see where Final Fantasy VII Remake gets a lot of its gameplay from. But it does have one really unique thing that I don't remember seeing in like any other Final Fantasy VII game, and that is the DMW wheel. And it's basically a slot machine with characters and numbers, and that dictates all sorts of things. When you get 3 characters in a row, you get a special limit break, and it can be healing, it can boost your DMW so that you get more of those limit breaks. Whereas if you match numbers, if you match 1 and 1, it'll upgrade your materia that you have in the first slot, and so on down the line. Other things, like if you get a 7, it will give you unlimited MP, it will give you invulnerability for a bit, things like that. It's a fun little element that gives you all sorts of boosts in combat. From a gameplay mechanics, I'm pretty happy. You can see that it was designed to be on a smaller scale originally because all the maps are very linear. There's no open world to this game. It's all very mission by mission. You have a bit of exploration. There are certain areas in the slums as well as in Midgard that you can explore, but it's not like a full open world game. But that's not really a complaint against the game. I think it's different and unique and works for this title. It also has one of my favorite features that I wish almost every other game had. There are so many other games that would benefit from it, and that is New Game Plus. I'm so glad it's there. I love replaying a game, but with an upgraded character. It's just a more entertaining experience for the second go through. Now let's get into the controls, and I don't have any complaints with the controls. I think they worked well, they're easy to learn, easy to remember, and they function great for how the game is. Last but not least, the graphics and visuals. And the first thing I'm going to say, and the thing that really disappointed me graphically and visually, is that the cutscenes are the exact same cutscenes as they were on the PSP. I don't notice any difference, and I think I was a little disappointed in that. As for everything else, it's kind of inconsistent. There are things that just don't look as clean as they should when you're putting them on like big old 4K screens like we all have now. But then there are other things that they really clearly cleaned up. If you look at the old game, it was very much limited by the technology it was on, and they went in and made everything look more realistic than it did previously. Everything had a cartoony element to it on the PSP that it doesn't have now. They definitely went for a more realistic look, but they didn't go as hard on it as I think I was really hoping. Not to say that it looks bad, but you look at the Final Fantasy VII Remake and ground up, complete overhaul, one of the most beautiful games out there, easily. And they didn't go that far with this game. It looks like it lands somewhere between like PS3 and like not quite PS4 levels, which is disappointing, although graphics aren't like the end-all be-all for me. When they fail hard. When they're done well, they just enhance the rest of the experience. And this is one of those games where it's been upgraded, it does look better, but it doesn't look quite as good as it could. That being said, that's just a graphics thing. As for the rest of the visuals, it all fits so very well within the Final Fantasy world, specifically Final Fantasy VII world. Every single character you can very much see fitting into that universe. Even if they're not in the original game, you could see how they belong in that world. As for the monsters, I think they did a great job bringing a lot of those to life in this game and fitting everything together. Overall, I do wish they had done better, but I think the graphics work well enough, is where I'll land on that. So to wrap this up, going into this, I was hoping for more of like a full-blown Final Fantasy VII Remake overhaul to Crisis Core, which I definitely didn't get, but that doesn't mean it's bad. I actually still really enjoyed the overall experience. I really enjoyed the gameplay. I've been dying to replay it, and you know what? It still lives up to that. I wasn't let down by the experience as a whole. So I have no problems recommending this. I fully endorse going and buying it if you're a fan of action RPGs, if you're a fan of Final Fantasy. I recommend this game. I've always enjoyed it, and I'm glad that when they brought it back and now I've played it like a decade later, I'm glad to replay it, and I enjoyed the experience all over again. Okay, so in the comments down below, why don't you tell me what's your favorite Final Fantasy spin-off? Or sequel, or prequel, or whatever. And as always, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button. And if you like what I'm doing in general, share and subscribe. Have a good one.